my screen. All right. So for today, we are going to see how useful it is for us to incorporate the use of auto layout in our designs, because in our last class we spoke about components and how to use reusable components for throughout our design, so that when we are making changes to one element in our design, it's going to affect the rest of the elements on the design, so that we don't have to start going into 100 frames that we have to start changing every little thing that we are trying to change on our design. So for today, we are going to see how we can resize different elements, like maybe like a box or a picture or a video or anything, without actually that is going to fit perfectly with the frame that we are designing for, either for a mobile frame or for a tablet or for your laptop. So first of all, let's just start with very the very regular button that we know. I think I've used button so many times before to describe so many things in this. The last class I used button to describe components and instance. So what today, let's try to use the same button to also describe its auto layout. So the use of auto layout is so as to resize any element that we are working with according to the frame. So by putting in the properties to that layout, they're not trying to tell the elements to behave a particular way in different frames. So let's say this, for example, and then we have our button. So we want to make this simple text. So this is just a text. We want to make this text an auto layout. So by clicking on Shift A, or you right click and then add auto layout. So like automatically you have made it an auto layout. So let's try to add a fill color to it and see, so we can see the changes that is happening. So on this button now, if you want to type more thing in this frame or reduce the letters in this frame, you will see that the frame is always going to adjust according to the letter that is inside. So say for example you have just one, so you can see it's taking the width of that element that is inside the frame, and it's always going to expand even if you are typing as much letters as possible. So if you create an auto layout, um the padding is always going to be 10. Like by padding, I mean the space in between these elements, like this text and then the box. Like you can see on this part, you can see this line that you have here. This is the padding. So the space in between this and the element is the padding. So the same thing with the top. And for every auto layout, the default padding is 10. So you can see here on the top here is 10, 10, 10. But you can always change it if for example you want to increase the left and right padding, or if you want to increase the top and and bottom padding. And even if you kind of press enter also, you can see that it's just changing according to what is on what is inside the frame. Doesn't really matter if it's just one element or is a whole lot. So let's try to see how it actually works on in our real design, because it might not entirely get the whole auto layout on this particular box that we have here. So I think we've done something like we've done this design before. So let's try to see if you can make an auto layout from this screen. And then I'm just going to use just this list of food that we have here. So let's try to remove the grouping and make it individual first of all. So you can see right now they are just separate. They are just single. They are all single elements. And if you want to work with um if you want to work with multiple like elements in an auto layout, like I mean multiple, like I mean that the way you have this picture is a single element, this text is a single element, this one here is also a single element. So if you want to put this frame, like the whole of this in an auto layout as against all these ones, you have to group each of them for it to form a frame. So like so you can either use grouping or you can either use a frame. So if you want to make all these cards, I can decide to remove this text so that I can explain what I'm trying to do here. But let's just leave this text just beneath the let's leave it beneath the images. So I want to make an auto layout for these cards that we have here. So and then I just select all of them and then I right click and select auto layout. So the short form is just to click on Shift A. You don't have to start by clicking. Then once it's on auto layout, so you can see, let's try to put the background so right so you can see what we are doing. So you can see that this spacing in between this and this is, you can see the little spacing we have here in between these different elements. So if for example you notice that okay, these frames are too close to the box, so you can decide to increase the left and right padding. So like 40, you can increase the top and bottom to like 40 for example, and then you can see that it's now giving more spacing and it's always going to be it's always going to be spaced evenly. So on this same frame, let's try to name this frame, let's say cards or food menu for example. So there are different cases where you don't want to like you don't want the individual frame to be aligned horizontally, you want them to be aligned vertically. So you can change the direction. You can see on this right panel is currently on horizontal layout. So once you change it to vertical layout, it's now going to align, still keeping the same spacing in between each of them, 16, 16, and the same padding. Is not going to alter anything. And even if you want to make it fit, you can always change it. Then on this width, so you can see that once you are changing it, like you want to change the width of this frame, you can see that the length inside is not changing, like they are not resizing to fit the frame. So you will have to click on this. You can see this width that we have here. So before we, if for example you want to make the element inside to be able to change its position. Like you want it like when you are reducing it, you want all the whole leftovers to go to the next row. So you don't want it to be outside like this. Then instead of you to put this um direct horizontal, they are going to use this wrap feature, so that when you are reducing the frame, it's just going to be reducing according to the size of the frame. But if it's just on horizontal, and then if you are reducing it, it's not going to change. So you can see that it's not changing, it's just still maintaining the same width. So that's the essence of using this wrap, so that when you are reducing it, the 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 ones that will want to float the next line can float in the next line. So you can see that even if you hover on this spacing in between here, you can see 16. You can decide to also use here to increase it like manually, or you can just go to the frame and then you put in the amount of spacing that you want. But if not, you can just come here and you reduce the in-between spacing that you have here. So also on this side, you can also decide that you want the the sizing of the element to either expand or reduce. So you can see on this for this instance, you can see for this instance, you can see that this spacing on this left side, on this right side, is too wide, than is bigger than this one by the left hand side. So if you want to evenly space it, so that at any point is always going to look balanced in the eye, like it's not going to look like the way it's looking right, and that the right spacing is too big than the left spacing. Because if you are trying to design this type of frame for a laptop, you like it's not going to look really appealing for different type of devices, especially if it's this size. So you want it that whatever size that it's on, let this frame try to resize its shape to fit in that width. So you click on this shape, and then on this width, you can see this layout, you can see on this width. On this width, you select, now presently is on fixed width. So you want it to behave based on the particular frame. So you click on fill container. So you can see that like everything has jam packed. Why? So let's try to take it back and see what happened. Because we did not put a, let's try to redo it. So if you make this thing to be fixed to fill the container, and then you are trying to expand it. Okay, we have to make each of them an on auto layout. So let's put this on auto layout and then use the fill container. So if you are trying to increase it, so you can see that is now the size, the width of this frame is now changing according to, but let's try to, so we want each of this is on group, so we want it to be aligned on the left hand, so that as you are changing it, this one is not going to, so let's try to, so this is always going to be left aligned. So that as you are increasing the width, it's always going to adjust according to the size of the frame. But you don't want just this particular frame to change the size. You want it to happen for every single frame that you have here. And then if you also notice, once you reduce it very small, so you can see how it's now scattering this our frame. Like it's no longer looking so fine like this. So if you want to make it to be better when it's very small, you have to set a minimum width so that once you get to that width, it cannot reduce lower than that again. So for this fill container that we've put on full fill container, you can add the minimum width. And then let's say the initial one was 150. So let's put the 150 as our minimum width. And then so that when we are reducing it, is not going to get lower than that 150. So you can see that that issue of making it to be very clustered is no longer happening. And once um this this right hand side padding is no longer bigger than the left hand side padding, in that instance, this first frame that we have here is going to expand to fill it up so that the spacing between in the left hand and the right hand are always going to be equal. There will not be any um, cases where you will have a bigger right padding than the low padding. So you can see how like the whole frames, they are all resizing to fit the size of the frame. Now let us repeat what we did for this first frame for every single thing. So we make each of them also an auto layout so that they would. So on this second frame, we'll select from this fixed width that it's currently is to fill container. So you can see it's now squeezing, meaning that we've not yet put the minimum width that it can reduce to. So we have to add the minimum width. And the minimum width we have is 150. So we add it to the 150. So we repeat the same process for everything. And then we add the minimum width also. So the essence of really putting this of putting the minimum width is so that there is a restriction to the size of the frame, of how very low the of how very low that the frame can reduce to. So the same thing with the height. So you can see on this option, you can see you can also add um, maximum height, but we are dealing with just the width, and that is why I'm just focusing on adding the maximum width. So you can see for as we are trying to reduce this frame, all these elements inside is always going to be adjusting based on the size of the frame. So you can see if you keep on reducing, it's going to change. It's going to keep on changing. So for if, for example, you want to design for a mobile screen and then you have 360, so you can see how it's just aligned from top to bottom. But then if you want to increase the width to say this is now aligned to, you want to also increase it. So the same instance for even for a larger screen of this, like everything just always going to align properly in between the entire frame. So I think our laptop screen is like 1440. So you can see like the spacing in between this left and the right are always going to be equal. And then you have the spacing in between here, 29. 29. It's always going to be equal, regardless of whether you are dealing with a lower rate or you are dealing with a higher rate. So even on this same auto layout, we have like the advanced setting. So say for example, you have like you want to make an auto layout of like three different boxes, for example. And then let's try to change the color so that can be. So let's say like all these so that it is the same um it's still the same um principle that we can use for this frame, for these different things. So just imagine the whole of this as a box, and these are different boxes. So that is why we are treating them as if the whole of this is a single element, because they are grouped together as one. So the same thing with like every single thing. So inside this frame, like there are instances where you can have an auto layout in an auto layout. So you can see that this whole box is an auto layout, but inside this frame, like the single frames that we have, is also an auto layout. You can see like the space in between this the text that we have here and the picture, you can see is 9, and the space in between here is still 9. So they are on auto layout. So that even if you want to increase it, for example, and then that means you now want to set the height now. You now want to set the height of this picture to be full container, so that as you are increasing the height of this frame, it's always going to be adjusting. It's always going to be adjusting based on the height of the frame. But then just like the way we set the minimum height or the maximum height, you can always set it. If you don't want it to be able to reduce so low like this, you can always the you can always add a minimum height or add a maximum height. So let's say we can add a minimum height of say 150, for example, and then if we want to reduce it, it cannot go below that 150. So like I was saying, so there are instances where you can have um an auto layout in an auto layout. So you can see on this section, that is what is allowing all these elements to always be stick to one position. So that, because there might be an instance where if you group, if for example, let's try to remake this thing, and then we remove the auto layout from it. So let's try to remove the auto layout by ungrouping each of them. So you can see like all the elements inside it is already scattered. So that's the essence of putting this whole section in an auto layout, so that as you are changing the size of this frame, it's not going to affect the positioning of your different elements, whether it is, if it is left aligned or if it is right aligned or whatever alignment you must have given it. It's always going to remain in that position, as against when, as you are changing it, everything is just catching and is not intact. So that's the essence of grouping, of framing everything to be an auto layer, so that it can act as a single element the way we have on this box here. So in this box, you can have different elements. You can have a picture, you can have a text, you can have different text. But as long as you've framed everything as one, Figma is going to identify is that this is just a single element, and it's going to leave the position how you have placed it before. So that is the essence of using an auto layout in your design. To always place, to always keep your different design elements in that same position where you must have placed it. So it's not going to scatter the way it's scattering right now. So on this, say for these 4 boxes, we make them an auto layer, so that we don't really have to start framing each of these, because they are just single elements. You only start framing each of it when you are dealing with multiple elements in that section you want to you are trying to auto layout. So since it's just a single box, there's no need for us auto layout each of the elements. So once you select all of them, you make it an auto layout. So it's still always going to follow the different things that I mentioned. So you can see on, even when the spacing is on negative, they are always going to intersect. So on this, once you click on this icon you have here, the settings, the auto layout settings, and then if, for example, is on a negative, negative spacing, so you can see how the green is coming below the blue is coming below the red. So if there are instances where you want to change the positioning, so you click on this auto layout setting, and then on this canvas stacking. Okay, first of all, this stroke, if you want the stroke to be excluded, so presently it's even excluded from the layout. So if you want it to be included, so you can see, let's see the difference. You can see this line is outside the main layout. So if you want it to be excluded, we have to make it a positive spacing. So let's try to do that. Um, okay, so you click on, it's no longer following so you can see this same mistake is still happening. The box is not resizing according to the frame. So you can set it on, so the difference between this hog content, you can see on this section, you have 3 options. You have the, now it's on the, so yeah, now you have fixed width, you have hog content, and you have fill container. The fixed width is when you want the width to be fixed, like you don't want, like whatever the frame is, you just want this width to always be on this width. Then the hog is, you want it to like the way you have this other element, is it is going to take the only available space that it have. It's not going to try to compete with any element beside it. It's just always going to take any available space that um that is left on that frame. That is what this hog this hog section, this hog content is always going to be. But the fill content is going to adjust based on the the frame. And most times, if you there are even different instances where, like, even if you are designing for a responsive design, like a mobile application or a laptop, you want to either use for your hog. But most times, what is being used, if you want to design for responsive, is using the fill container. So on these other parts, if for example you have a negative spacing, and then you want to kind of change the positioning, either from, like, the way you have there now, you have the books below. Um, so you're seeing that the green is below and the blue is on top. So if you want to change the positioning, you just come here and then you see first on top. So it changes, and the same thing with, so it's just for different instances where you might be designing something and then you want to change the positioning your of your frames. You can always come here to change it. Then on this other parts, since this these two elements are also on auto layout, so let's try to make it an auto layout. But then you want to also change the instance so that this icon, we can change either when it's on top, or let's try to ungroup it first and then make it an auto layout. Why is this thing? I want to put section or auto layout. Mm, right. Auto layout, yeah. So if you want to, um this is where this align text baseline will come from. You can be implemented. If you want to change the aligning of, though this might not be entirely useful, but if you want to make use of this advanced auto layout setting, if you want to change the different the positioning of different elements, you don't have to start moving things up and down. You can just easily go to this layout setting and then align text baseline, so that if you want it to be on top or if you want it to be aligned at the bottom. Also, say for example, you have a bigger frame, for example, and then let's let's make it, okay, we have to remove the fill for it to be fixed. We have to make it to be fixed, each of them, for me to show this particular example. So say for example, we have a bigger frame, and then you want to now position these elements either on the top left or at the top right. So you can see on this graph, you can see it's kind of showing different angles where you can position your elements. So on this page, it's saying align top left, showing that you can align it either at the top or at the bottom or at the top center or top right or middle right. You can always position your different elements based on where you want them to be. And it's not going to alter any positioning of the initial elements that you have. So I've used the I've used a very simple card format to describe what an auto layout is, so that if for and so if for instance if you are trying to you make this particular frame into like a tablet form, you don't have to start you don't have to start redesigning each of these elements for it to fit the tablet form, so that when is when you are trying to expand each of them, it's just going to fit. So um let's try to copy this our layout and fix it into this one that we have here, and then try to increase this phone and see what happens. So because I have removed all of this before, I have to, what can I undo? There's this one. Is it on? Oh, yeah, this one is okay. So let's use this one instead and do what you want to do. So we have this particular frame. So let's reduce the weight. So let's try to um replace this frame with the one that is here. So say for example, we are trying to we are trying to we are trying to replicate this this phone on a tablet. Let's even try to even bring a tablet. What's the tablet sizes that we have? Where is our tablet device again? Okay. We are trying to now design this same thing that we have here on our tablet frame, for example. So you can see we are going to replace this our better auto layout on this, so that when we are trying to resize, you can see how it's now fitting into this frame, so that we don't have to go through the stress of trying to worry how we are going to increase the width of each of these elements. So like the reason why these ones cannot um change, because we have not put all of this into an auto layout. So you can see how everything is just scattering. So that is the reason why you cannot just come and start stretching it out in proportion. It's not going to align at all. You have to put all your designs in an auto layout so that as you are trying to redesign for a bigger frame or a smaller frame, all you have to do is just to be is just to be adjusting the width of your different elements, and everything is just always going to be size to fit that frame. So there are different instances where we can use this auto layout. So I've shown you guys one. I'll show you guys one in a for a card-like design. We During our design, we might come in contact with designing for like in a card-like. So like every design that has this kind of structure, like even this part is a card, this section is a card, this section is a card. Like almost every section on this frame, they are all in different cards. So in our designs, we might always come in contact with designing for different cards, so that on each of those cards you can always put some auto layout, so easily increase or decrease the size of this. So it's the same thing with this also. So you can see as you are reducing this our button, this is supposed to be a button, even if it's not really looking like a button presently. Okay, instead of manually, you can reduce it. So you can see as you are reducing it like this, though there's no button that can be tiny as this, but as you're reducing it like this, so you can see that this element is just stretching out. So you can always, add this same um this same option of always filling the container, and then you want it to have a minimum width of, say, what is here now? Let's say 100, for example. What's present? So you can see as you are reducing it, it's no longer stretching out. It's just resizing because the minimum width has been set, and it's always going to fall into that particular frame. So we can also use this same auto layout to create different instances on our designs. So there might be a scenario where we might also want to design a table, like say for our dashboard. So we are designing a dashboard for our food vendors, for example, and then you need to create a table for them. You don't have to start be creating each of these one by one and start duplicating and all of those things. By just simply using auto layouts, you can achieve this in very split seconds. So let's just say, for example, you have got your different elements that you want to use. So this is like the first this stick, the first symbol, the second row, the second column, third row, and everything. So once you have everything, so you want to now use auto layouts to easily create a very simple row. So once you have all your elements you want to use, so you can see that each of these elements now, because they are all standalone, there is no need for us to start framing each of them. But on this last one, you can see that on this last one, there are like 5 different elements on this particular section. So because we want this part to act as one single element, that is the reason why we have to group them or frame them. So that Figma will only identify this as a single element. So once we select all this and then we click on our Shift A to make it, or you right click and then you select your auto layout. So you can see you've created the auto layout. So let's try to put our color so that we can easily see our elements. So you can see we've created the auto layout, but presently is on vertical. So we want to make it to be horizontal. So we change the direction to be like horizontal. So you can see what is happening here. This our this this frame, you can see the text and the other elements, they are all stretching out of the frame. It's not taking the size of the frame. That means we have to we will have to frame each of them. So that let's see if it's now going to behave the way it's supposed to behave. So on this each of them now, this is a frame already. Let's try to put each a frame and let's see if it's going to be better like that than making it a single element. So if you select everything now and then make it auto layout, is on white, so it's still following the same pattern. Let's Shift A, make it an auto layout, make it to be background color. So so you can see that it's still following the same. That means this are width. We have to adjust this width to presently is on fixed width. So we have to, each of them has to be a frame for us to be able to work on it. So let's see. We'll make each of them a frame so that is going to let's ungroup it first so that it can stand alone. Hmm, just like this before. Okay. So if you notice what happened here, when we are trying to make it a frame, the some of the elements were still stretching out of the frame. So that was the essence of, that is where this our hug, let me keep back a frame. So this our hug content is now going to come into hand. So presently is on fixed width, and then if we try to add a color to it and make it vertical, so you can see this our frame, our text and every other thing is still extending outside this frame. So you want your frame to be able to contain all the whole elements. I don't want to start manually changing it to to start um to start changing the width manually. So you want to use the auto layout features to be able to change this particular frame so that you can contain all the whole elements. So instead of it to be on this fixed width, you want it to hug everything. Like you want it to stretch his hand to cover up every element that is inside it. So that's the essence of putting these hug elements. And you can see how is stretching to contain everything that is inside a particular frame. So you can also increase the spacing in between the different elements in case they are very jam-packed. So as you are increasing it, the frame is also increasing because it's always going to hug the element that is inside that particular frame. So let's also increase the padding. So this padding is for horizontal and vertical. So it could be left and right. If you want to increase the vertical padding, that's top and bottom. So you can also increase it. So you can see how our role is perfectly coming together instead of trying to instead of instead of trying to create like each of the elements one by one. And if you also notice on this left side, it's supposed to be smaller than the right side. That means we have to change the individual padding. We have to use individual padding. So we click on this box that we have here, and then you have for this left padding, you want it to be smaller than you want the right padding to be bigger. So you can see this side is now bigger than this other side. So another very importance of auto layouts is that you can always change the position of your different elements. So say for example, this is our row one, and then we now want to duplicate this row one. And let us say our background of row two is like this, for example. So we want to, so you can see this single row is an auto layout to house these different elements here. So we want each of this row now to also be on its own auto layout so that you can easily um change the position of each of this row without any process of trying to rearrange and trying to redesign it from the scratch. So once you make this an auto layout, for example, and then you duplicate it. So if you want to bring this purple layout up, it's very easy for you to bring. You just have to drag it and to position itself on wherever you want to drag it to. So you can see how it's easily positioning itself. So if this is not an auto layout and then you want to change this position, it's going to take you a longer amount of time than what auto layout is going to save you for. So that is just the another benefit of also using auto layouts for the purpose of positioning your elements at different angles, or if you want to change it. So the same way we also have for this our frame here. So if for example you want to change this to this next one, it's easy for you to always move without you trying to redesign like everything. You have to take out this part, bring in this other one. It's going to take more time as against you just easily moving this form, and it's always going to still maintain the same spacing like it was initially without altering any position. So I think we've covered every part of the auto layouts, if I'm not mistaken. And we've covered like two instances where we can implement this auto layout, both on the card like or on our table like designs. So do you have any questions? Do you have any questions or network? You can unmute and speak.
Good evening, ma.
Yeah, good evening.
Okay, ma, my question is, for this auto layout we did for different screens that we can use. So, if you're going to use a responsive um like you're doing a responsive design, and then you did for what's it called? You did for a mobile frame, and you want to do for a laptop. So you're just going to keep autolaying all the elements inside and just stretching it like when you're using for a laptop screen. Is that it? Just going to be stretching it.
If you said if you want to design for a laptop
Yes.
and then you can you can only stretch the parts that you have already auto layout. So you can see on this other parts I made example, you can see if you are trying to stretch it, it's not balancing, is not taking like is not resizing according to how you are stretching it. It's just capturing how it's supposed to be. So that's the essence of using your auto layout, so that as you are stretching it, the it's always going to balance according to what you stretch it to be. So you
Yes,
can
I
only
understand
stretch
that.
your
My
auto
question
layout.
is actually if you can you hear me, ma?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, now my question is if you want to you want to bring all the designs to the laptop screen now, you're going to auto lay out everything, all the elements you want to use. Then you are just going to be stretching it on the new screen you want to um use, right? That's the only thing
Yeah,
you do.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other question? You guys understood this particular, it was not as confusing as the components and the components section. You guys understood this auto layers very well. Somebody said. So there are no more questions, right? Network. How can we even solve this our network issue? How can we um, this our network issue is always a problem. How can we create responsive dashboard? How do we responsive dashboard? Which of the dashboard?
Good evening, like the back end, like of a website or something.
The back end.
Yes, you said something about dashboard. So how do we make it responsive? Because I heard and I've seen dashboard that looks like difficult to create and is responsive, like a graph is going up and down and the rest like that, the likes like that.
By dashboard you mean all those um dashboard for applications.
Figures counting, graphs increasing and reducing, like in real time, something like that.
It's still the same concept of auto layouts. If I'm getting what you are saying, if you have different graphs and then you frame that graph and you make it to fill the content, to fill the container. So as you are reducing the frame, the graph will also be reducing.
Okay. Thank you.
Like, you get what I'm saying? Like the same way we also did this, each of these to be fill container. You also make that graph, however the width or the height, it could be bigger than this, it could be as big as this. So you make the the graph a frame, and then you make that frame to be fill container, so that as you are reducing the frame or increasing the frame, that graph is always going to reduce or increase according to the frame that is on. So I think this is the same concept of auto layouts. The fill container part. So let's try to um which one would I try to do? Is this present? Okay, this is presently on fix. So let's try to redo this particular section. So you can see on this part, let's reduce the so let's do we do this. This is let's put it on fix so that I can explain. So for this frame, so say you want to reduce it. So you can see there are instances where it's the leftovers are actually going down to the next row. So you can say as you are trying to reduce this frame, this this one that could not enter the space will now flow over to this next row. So, but there are different instances where you have something like this, and then you can see that this frame will not be able to enter this particular section, that you have here. So that is why you have this big white empty space. And if this is on the laptop, it might not really look balanced in the eye because of this very white space that is just left here. Why all your elements are just squeezing themselves on this other part. So that's the essence of using your fill container, so that whatever the size of the frame, the elements are always going to space out for it to balance well on that frame. So the way you have each of these elements, you can see that these elements presently that are on fixed width. So if you put it on fill container, each of them on fill container, so that once you reduce the once you reduce this frame, it's always going to want to balance. It doesn't really matter how low or how um how wide or how close it is. It's always going to be balanced. So you can see as it's reducing. So you can see how that one that was just fetching one side at this right hand side, you can see how that one is stretching out so it can be balanced in the eye. So that's the essence of using a fill container. So at whatever position it is, all the elements inside it is always going to stretch out to fit into that particular element. There will not be any unwanted space around the the frame. So let's try to duplicate this and then remove this as, let's make it fixed so that you can see the difference between these two frames, where one is fixed and the other one is so you can see for this one, let's try to make it the same width between this and this. This is, let's try to reduce this. So you can see, if you have a frame where you are designing with these two different frames, and then you have this, you can see that this second frame, they are kind of unwanted space. You see on this place, this is just an unwanted white space. On this side, this is an unwanted white space. But for this first one, where everything is just fitting in, it's stretching in to fit the particular width of the container that is on. So that is one great importance of using your fill container, so that at whatever width it is, it's always going to stretch to balance the space that is inside that frame. There will not be any unwanted thing that is going to make your design not look clean. So I hope you understand the fill container now. Okay. So do you have any other questions? So it seems this auto layout topic is not as difficult as the components and properties section. And it will be also a good thing for you guys to use it in your very little assignment that you are doing, so that as you are practicing it, it's always going to stick better. So you don't have any questions, no comments, no concerns, no questions. All right. So in the absence of no further questions or comments, we'll come to the end of the class.